I have always said that the two things that I personally have found most beneficial apologetically is a competent grasp on the biblical languages and an understanding of church history.
Hmm.
Because while there are obviously kind of arguments for the existence of God or the problem of evil, those type of more typical apologetic type arguments and narratives, when I'm dealing with atheists, Mormons, Jehovah's Witnesses, skeptics, I've almost always ran into objections that either had me interacting with the biblical text in one way or another, or dealing with some sort of maybe miscommunication or misunderstanding about church history. I
Hmm.
mean, I can't tell you how many times I've had to articulate what indeed happened at the Council of Nicaea. Um, so just having even a base level knowledge of church history has been helpful, but also being able to open a Greek New Testament and say, okay, you're raising this objection. That's great. Let's look at how that operates exegetically within the text is very, very useful. And I think that feels daunting to some people, but if you're able to do it, man, it goes a long way because there's a lot of just misunderstanding and confusion. And, groups like Muslims and Jehovah's Witnesses, they'll kind of play fast and loose with some things grammatically or syntactically within the text that A, indicate that they actually can't read the languages, but B, with a just comprehension of what's actually going on, can pretty much clear up some of those issues.
Yeah, no, for sure. I remember in college, actually, these Jehovah's Witnesses coming to my door, and we started talking, and they made some claim about John 1. And so I brought out my Greek New Testament and just sat down. And so we started going through it together. Honestly, at the time, I like compared to what I know now, like I just didn't know anything. But I could read through, the text in Greek. And you realize, honestly, for most people, most of those people, like they're spitting out an argument that they heard from someone else, and it's just it just becomes a like, well, the person that I trust said something different. But I guess that brings up a question, and I think an issue today, right? What one that I see often is like the biblical languages being abused, right?
Yeah.
I mean, I see the whole like, Hebrew letter means a thing. I
Yeah.
just, it's hard for me to even sort of engage those things. I mean, I understand how they get there, so I should maybe be more sympathetic. But you have all of these statements made in the apologetics world about the biblical languages. How do you see people using it well and people abusing, the biblical languages? One, and what advice would you give to people who don't know the languages?
Yeah, I mean, it's interesting that you bring up, the example of John 1:1. I was listening to a podcast that came out just last week with, the popular atheist Alex O'Connor, who's on the Julian Dory podcast. And he actually made what was pretty much a typical Jehovah's Witness, argument for that in the definitive statement about John 1:1 and pointing to the anarthrous use of theos. And then tried to make the argument that because of the definite article on theon and its anarthrous use on theos, right, anarche and halagos, kai halagos, and proston theon, kai theon, in halagos, that the first instance of God is pointing to the being of God, and the second is simply saying something analogous to the word being godlike or
Yeah.
like having a divine quality, but not actually being God. And it's like, no, like we've been through that before. But these things are really common, right? And I think a lot of people don't know what they don't know, and that's
Yeah.
more often the case. Is that they're like you said, parroting something, or like the Hebrew kind of Paleo Hebrew, bringing out the meaning of each individual letter and coming up with all sorts of uh, definitions and understandings. There's lots of that online. I think where I would encourage people is that, you can only gain, if you're a Christian, you can only gain a better understanding of the text from trying to learn the languages. And I totally
Mm.
understand that not everybody is well suited to something like, in fact, I would say personally, I am not. Very early on, I found languages very tricky and they were a means to an ends. And I had a Greek professor who liked to say that learning, at the time it was Greek, right? Learning Greek is like when Jacob wrestles with the angel of God, and that, you got to hold on until it blesses you, and sometimes you're going to walk away limping. And so, but at the end of the day, I think it will benefit you because I don't know who made this comment, but the idiom that the best commentary of the Bible is going to be the Bible in its original language. That's going to help you the most in terms of fleshing those things out. And if we're going to say definitive things regarding the text of the Old Testament, we need to remember that it was not written in English. It was written in Hebrew. And the text of the New Testament was not written in English. It was written in Greek. Or maybe you could argue, 1611 King James English is what it is. But depending on your perspective, right, it's only going to benefit you. And nowadays, I mean, when I started learning Greek, or Hebrew for that matter, there were a lot less resources that were available. I was making my own flashcards. I was, trying to figure out ways to memorize these things. And nowadays we have Biblingo, right? Problem solved. You final stop. But I genuinely mean that in the sense that the technological advancements in things like apps or watching videos is just far more of a resource than it ever has been. And so I would really try to encourage people that it's probably not as daunting as you think. And it's probably not as arduous as you think. Just taking your time and learning and digging into these things, starting with something simple, the First John, the Gospel of Mark, right? Not the complicated stuff. Don't jump into Hebrews. And I think people actually, they sell themselves short and probably are able to get and comprehend more than they realize. And it just cuts out all of the possibility for saying the silly things about Paleo Hebrew letter meanings. It avoids us making silly arguments for the trustworthiness or truthfulness of a scriptural claim when there are actually good arguments for those things, right? There are good reasons why Jesus is God. You don't have to kind of break apart and waterboard Bereshit and find it in the first verse of the Bible, right? So I'm always trying to encourage people that you probably are able to learn more than you think you are.